What's up, guys? Welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Gear with coaches Skip Hill, Andrew Berry, myself, Scott McNally, and we are joined by our special co-host, back again, Nate Spear. What's going on, man?
What's up, guys? How you doing today?
Good to have you. All of our programming is brought to you by you guys, the people at Patreon. Thank you for all your support. We've got a few Patreon questions here today. And by the way, anybody who wants to take part in the show, comment below, because we could use questions for all the shows. You guys help to make us do this thing, so put it all together. We're also brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK for additional savings over there, and SupplementSource.ca for our Canadians. Diving right in. What was our topic, Andrew? It was something along the lines of when to add in orals, basically, to your plan, being a cut or an off season.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there's lots of applications. There's different types of orals. We could all maybe pick our favorite times to add orals in, or what I had started talking about before we turned on the microphones was, maybe educating people on how to layer in orals towards the end of a cut or towards the end of a prep. It doesn't have to be a prep, but more so to elicit a cosmetic look out of it versus just an ergogenic benefit in the gym. Okay. I prefer Winstrol personally, and I know Skip's going to counter me with his favorite being Anavar, but I like Winstrol personally because of the dryness that you get out of it. In terms of like when to add it in, I think 4 to 5 weeks before you're ready to either hit the stage or before, let's say, you got a vacation planned of some sort. I like to do about 5 weeks out, starting with something like 50 milligrams a day. I'm not afraid to bump it up to 100 milligrams a day, but I think most people would be fine somewhere in that 25, 50, maybe even 40 milligrams a day in terms of application.
Before we got,
I don't know if I'm going to counter you.
I had to throw this comment up here. Just Andrew's looking extra wide today, which he is. Do you see that, Skip? He's got the angle.
It's funny because when someone mentioned about Nate, I first noticed that I'm right underneath him and the contrast sucks. Then I look over to my right and I'm like, I think Andrew looks slightly broader here than Nate. I'm sorry, no shot at Nate there. But I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to go put on a flannel and put some balloons in my delts underneath
I even think
shirt.
that
I don't know.
Nate might be matching you on tan, actually, just at least in this lighting.
Yeah, exactly.
He's kind of busting into your space there. You know what I mean? He's
now
blowing
I'm
up your spot.
the smallest guy on the show, and I'm not the darkest. This is,
sorry to interrupt you, though. I apologize.
If I have a bad connection and I can't stay on the show today, no, I'm gonna say, look, everybody knows because I'm very vocal about it. I am a big fan of Anavar. I typically put it in first, and a lot of times I'll start it sooner, but I always get Winstrol in there. I'm a fan of Winstrol too, just not as much of a fan as the Anavar. And I have this one minor side effect when I take Winstrol, that my hands get real tight. I don't know if you guys have had that. And when I say tight, it's not horrible. It's not, but it's enough for me to notice. And you sit there and you just do like this sometimes 5 times a day. You're like, oh yeah, my hands are a little tighter than usual. But outside of that, I put an Anavar maybe 10 weeks out, and then I'll wait until 6 or sometimes 8 weeks with the Winstrol. I think I run orals. I might run orals typically longer than you do, Andrew. Like when you say 5 weeks, I'm like, no, I've got orals in by 5 weeks. But that's just me, and it's probably more because I'm a big fan of Anavar. I may not put the Winstrol in. I'm about a 6 to 8 week with the Winstrol. So if I had to say 90% of the time, I'm probably 10 weeks out Anavar, and it can be out whether it's a show or a cut, but 6 to 8 weeks of Winstrol.
Can I also offer that the reason why 5 weeks out seems like a good time frame for me is because typically, like, I will always have clients do multiple shows. So like
if they're doing a move, then
if they're doing a qualifier in October and nationals or whatever is in November 1st, it's going to end up being a longer run. But I'm saying from the first show, I think, and honestly, if you can't, qualify for, nationals without a longer use of some of those orals, you probably shouldn't be doing nationals or a show of that caliber. You know what I'm saying? So it's not to say that I run it shorter duration. I was just given a time frame of when to add it in, as well as for people that let's say they're not competitors. They're like, hey, I'm going on a cruise for a week and I want to be the most jacked diesel guy out of my group. I would probably say, 5 weeks for him is probably a good time frame.
Another tip just in that situation too is if you're going on a cruise and you want to look like the most jacked guy, go on a Carnival cruise because they're all obese and they have no tans, and you could go in like mediocre shape and you're going to be the best in shape dude there on the cruise. Trust me.
I might take it even shorter for Sdrol personally. I might do even like 4 weeks for number one, that reason you mentioned, Andrew. I think that's smart because you get people that are planning for, 8-10 weeks out from that first show, and newer guys might not be thinking of, like, I know you wouldn't do that either, Skip. You're not going to have somebody do that for the first show, 8 weeks, 10 weeks for that first show, and then go another, 6 weeks, racking up to like 16 weeks on an oral, right. Of course. But I even found though, like for me, I think that one of the limiting factors with Sdrol is I have seen people get joint issues after an extended period of time with a higher dose, and I'm one of those people. I found that for me, like anything after 6 to 8 weeks is going to be potentially an issue. So I found I've relied more on the other DHTs, something like Masteron, and obviously we're getting somebody absolutely peeled. So if you've got them absolutely peeled, you've got the Masteron in there, I probably already have the Tren in there, then I feel like for me that oral is going to be like an icing on the cake, and like 50 Sdrol for a light heavyweight is probably going to be where I would go for just that last 4 weeks, and something along those lines is probably what I do. But hey, I might add some Halo in for the last 2 on top of that. Who knows?
For sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely a Winny guy as well because for me personally, I just noticed the effects much greater and more like the hardness and like like sort of like dry, like white guy look. You know what I'm talking about.
The Branch Warren look.
But yeah, I'll say I would agree with you guys because for me, honestly, I would say 7 days in, like I see the effects pretty much fully rocking and rolling. You know what I mean? I can tell visually, like, okay, everything's good to go. So like, why would I need much longer time than that? But I will say too, like, I mean, sometimes like I don't mind doing a little bit of Anavar early, like later in the prep, and then switching over to Sdrol. You know what I mean? Depending on the person, but to help with like fullness and dieting hard, those like 12 weeks to like 8-7 weeks, and then switch over to Sdrol. I might do that too with some people.
How about using both?
Yeah, I've seen that too. I mean, I haven't done it. But
I've got a few people. I'll go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, the first time I did it was with a client who had a prescription for 25 Var and 25 Sdrol. And I think it was even like in the same capsule. Of course it was a compounding pharmacy that put this together for him. But we ended up doing just that. And I figured, okay, well, 25 and 25, that gives us a 50 total. Let's just run that. I can't remember how long we ran it for, but it probably wouldn't have been longer than like 6 weeks. He was a men's physique guy at that. Really good shape, but it's like we already, we didn't need to run a lot more on top of it. It worked great for him. It was the first time I'd ever done it. I've done it a couple times since, and it's not something I would say I would go out of my way to be like, hey, let's do this combo. But sometimes it just comes up and it makes sense. Maybe it's just that's what the guy has. He's got, 50 of these and 50 of these, and we're like, okay, well, let's do this, Yeah.
What do you guys think of this? And I want to ask Nate this first, but I want to know what you guys think. No, we haven't mentioned Anadrol. And here's the thing. I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on Anadrol at any point, not just in a cut, but let's just say like a prep phase. I'm just going to say I didn't used to like it, and I do like it a lot more. But I wondered if you guys did, and if you did, where do you see that in the prep phase?
Honestly, I've used it with a couple people in the beginning because you still have that strength and your appetite's going down. So it's actually, I think, almost a better time to run it, especially if they're coming off like a cruise phase, like into the prep. You know what I mean? And like only like short bursts, maybe like 3-4 weeks, and then pull it out. But to help grow some new muscle during that beginning phase of prep, in my opinion, I think it's really beneficial.
Okay. The reason I asked is because I have put it in for myself the last 3 to 4 weeks when I'm really lean. I didn't end up getting on stage, and it was twice. but I really liked it. I knew at that point it was more of an experiment, so I could see it. If I didn't like it, then I didn't have to worry about getting on stage, but or basically screwing it up and getting on stage. But
I've done it more days, not weeks.
Oh, okay.
Days.
Yeah, and that was a thing, last day or two, prior. I never really saw much out of that with the handful of clients that I had tried out. I didn't really see anything.
I found like maybe 5 days, depending on the person, but we've added it in as a test. When they're super lean and you've got 4 weeks to go or whatever, we've added it in as a test. And I can't remember who said it to me, but they felt like at a certain point it almost got to be too much. And to kind of know where that point was. And I've kind of looked at that as being my roadmap. And so I've run it maybe, we see how they look on day 4, day 5, day 6. And I say, okay, it doesn't look like it's getting any better than this from there. And then I figure okay, let's run it. Say the show is Saturday. Maybe we end up figuring that okay, we started on Monday, something like that. And then I did that for a few years, and then this last year, or maybe it was the year before, I started experimenting with Sdrol in place of it. So I'll kind of take the question further. I know, Andrew, we want to get your opinion on this, but I also want to ask you guys about Sdrol for the same thing.
Let's talk about Sdrol first. I agree with you guys generally on the A-bombs. I'm more of a 10 to 15 day spurt on the Anadrol, honestly, because so if you're 15 weeks out from your show, you're still eating a fair amount of food. I find that most people they get to the 10th, 12th day of Anadrol and their appetite starts to really fade. They start saying, man, hey, I missed my last meal the last 3 days, but the scale keeps going up. So I want to point out that that's the wonderful thing about Anadrol is that it's somehow you just magically continue to grow and get heavier out of thin air while consuming less. Yeah. But it does have that effect on your appetite where it just mentally you're I can't even eat another meal. It's just not happening. Yeah. With the Sdrol though, I go back and forth because I can think of 2 cases of people I've worked with where it worked really well. And I can think of a big case where we've tried it twice and it's the 2 worst looks he ever had. And we're trying to, run through all these scenarios of why didn't you look the way we wanted you to look or why? And yeah, obviously there's prep fatigue and there's all that stuff. But then we're wait a minute, we used Sdrol for both of those contests. And it's you know what? We're just putting that one on the shelf for you, at least in terms of pre-contest application. I mean, Nate, what do you want to say about it?
Yeah, that's actually me. So, but also going off of obviously person experience who dealt with that. I think for me, it was more of digestion, not being able to keep my stomach in control. And I find sometimes that can happen with Anadrol as well. Yeah. When you're those final phases, because honestly, where I was at was man, I could pull my stomach in so much better. Then all of a sudden it was it was such a task and it was seemed very much harder than normal. You know what I mean? So, in both cases, we did it twice and it's happened both times and they were 3 years apart, 4 years apart. So, definitely for me, I think that's another thing a lot of guys tend to maybe miss or not necessarily be aware of, but a lot of people run into digestion issues deep into prep, and sometimes it can be the drugs and a lot of people looking at the food. But I've had guys I had to pull their Sdrol because they were just having constant digestion issues and really couldn't even get meals down, and then pulling it and then things coming together. But it sucks because I could see the visual difference when I did that. You know what I mean? I was oh damn, I really want to slam that Sdrol. But so yeah, definitely I've run into some issues there myself, yeah.
And that could be that individual component too, where everybody does respond a little bit different or differently to these, these different compounds. So when we talk about these things, as a listener, we're kind of answering them for the majority of people versus making these very black and white blanket statements.
Yeah, yeah.
I've read that I believe it's Mike Arnold prefers Sdrol for women over the last, as their main oral in the last couple weeks before a contest.
Really?
And we're talking, your upper muscular classes, your women's physique, bodybuilding, and even some figure. Yeah. We're talking 10 milligrams a day. I think two 5 milligram doses per day, that kind of thing. Just, something of note.
Huh. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. Nothing I ever experimented with. I think is interesting, Nate, you mentioned Anadrol earlier on. I haven't really done many orals earlier on. I had stayed away from things earlier on. It's funny the way our coaching works, and I'm sure you guys can all attest to this, but over the years, your perspectives change. Like early on, I would definitely want to get like a good strong anabolic in at the beginning of the prep to make sure we can gain as much muscle as possible. And then for a long time, I was just like, well, we really only need test. We're just trying to get you lean at this point. And now I'm starting to shift back to that. Like, let's get some NPP in there out the gate, for that first 6 weeks, something like that.
Well, I'll say my justification on that is because most guys that I have in the off season, I don't really use orals anymore. So I'm like, okay, I haven't used any orals in the off season. So it sort of gives me a wiggle room to use that in the beginning of preps. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So where do you guys put? Like, I would say honestly, 9 times out of 10, it seems like that everyone runs into those appetite issues. You know what I mean? So whereas like I was saying, like maybe even not like, we'll say 14, 13 weeks out, because their appetite, they're getting hungry again. So it's like you don't see that effect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where do you guys put the toxicity of, like, if you were to compare Superdrol to Anadrol, I kind of, as bad as Anadrol is, I still think Superdrol is it's like Pac-Man eating dots like liver cells. That's the way my brain processes it.
You know that feeling of the heartburn / just, I don't know what better word other than just pressure kind of up through the whole digestive system. I feel like Superdrol exhibits that more than any other compound, personally.
I couldn't last long on it for that reason. I never really got a good run on it. I tried multiple times, and that happened every time. I ended up giving it away to somebody else. It was the one and only time I bought it.
Yeah.
But in the off season, if I've used it in the off season, I end up tapping out, like you were saying, Scott. Like I'll make it to like 2 weeks, and I'll be like, "Man, F this." Like, and also I get like that. I get very lethargic on it.
Yeah, me too.
Will to like do nothing. So it's like this is horrible.
That's the worst feeling too, because you're like, I know I should be doing something. I know I should be like at least go for a walk, because I'll feel better if I go for a walk. But you don't even have the mental energy to go for a walk or to. You're like, if you had to build something else, I'll do that when I'm done all this stuff after this prep or after this off season. It does make you both physically and mentally lethargic in that sense.
It was Jordan Peters when he was on Muscle Minds years back now, like 2016, 17 era. It's when he got me start thinking differently, because he'll use orals like a power lifter might, more relationship to strength. And that's where I started seeing, hey, maybe Anadrol could be a benefit for me or people I work with, and same with Superdrol in those instances where you're at your all-time strongest, and let's take just a little bit, or let's just run it on your like push-pull legs. Let's use it on just your leg day or just your pull day, something like that. And I do think there is a pre-workout benefit to it, even if you're only using it, once a week or twice a week. And we can avoid some of those issues that we're talking about too that way, Hey, what's up, guys? I have a lot of people who reach out to me on a regular basis who are trying to more effectively reach their goals. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is that they're not getting enough protein. And there's only so much chicken breast we can eat through the day, but we can easily add a high-quality protein supplement to boost those numbers up. True Nutrition has just about every protein powder you can think of, from high-quality whey isolate. If you don't tolerate lactose, then you could use their beef isolate, or you could use their pea protein isolate if you don't eat animal products. They literally have everything you could think of. I've believed in them for like a decade before they advertised with us, and they never went out of their way to say like, hey, we want to promote our stuff through you. I literally asked them because it's a company that I believe in, and at the end of the day, I want to see you guys reach your goals as effectively as possible. So if you use our code THINK at True Nutrition, you'll get some savings, you'll help to support our programming, and you'll get some high quality products to more effectively reach your goals faster.
My past experience, which was awesome, was some test No Ester, 100 mgs of Anadrol, and 20 mgs of Halo, about 2.5 hours before with the TNE, and then about 2 hours before with the orals, and you'll put up some pretty awesome numbers for yourself.
I loved TNE personally, but I don't think everybody's had the same experience. I remember there was this source that was on Pro Muscle, and the vials came in they're like 60 milliliter vials, and you had to basically take it out of the bottle it was in and put it into other vials. So I'd always, filter it and everything. And I went in on an order with a good friend of mine, and we got a 60 milliliter vial of T&E. He took half of it. I took the other half. So and I say that because it's not like it was two different vials from two different batches, possibly. We had what came from the same bottle. I absolutely loved it. Had the greatest workouts. He said he didn't notice anything from it. I've heard that for some reason with T&E. Some people, it's a handful of people have been like, nothing.
I feel like that was sort of like a popular thing, like maybe 5 or 10 years ago, was the test suspension and like the test no ester, and I don't really see that anymore. People using that. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I don't even know that it.
I think you like the injectables. Like, are we talking about like injectable orals in general, like in that category? And I apologize, it is like absolutely pouring right now.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah. Is it better if I turn the mic off in between me speaking, or
it stopped now? I don't hear it.
Yeah, I don't hear it either.
Oh, I gently hear it in the background, but that's okay.
Right.
People can use it as ambience.
It's all I can hear, honestly. But it's supposed to be raining on your house too, right?
Yeah.
Bailey, but I was
my Thunder buddy is right underneath my legs right now.
What I was going to say though was like I think what you're saying, Nate, is like that whole group of like TNE, test suspension, injectable D-ball, what else? Injectable anadrol, like all these different compounds. They were kind of like a big hit maybe 5-6 years ago, and now guys are kind of falling off and maybe just doing more standard injectables.
I love them.
Something tells me Scott knows about this one. What do you
I
know
love
about
them.
What do you know about pig's blood, Scott?
Pig's blood? What are you talking about?
You never heard that one? It was like a mix of like no suspension, a bunch of like different stuff in like one thing, like that powerlifters were using.
No,
I think it was like trend no whatever, and then like test no suspension mixed together or something.
Yeah, I never used Trend No Ester, but Test No Ester. I had a Test No Ester D-ball combo, and I liked that. And I may have had a bottle that lasted up until very recently. So I had been off everything, like literally I have no reason to really cycle. But I love D-ball. D-ball to me was like, it made me feel good in the gym, makes me, in a good mood too. In fact, the wife even commented on that. She was like, yeah, like you can see the positive benefits of this stuff, And anyway, and I did feel good and got more consistent, and everything was running smoothly there. But I found that just a low dose, TRT, nothing else, and I'm talking like 15 to 20, maybe 25 milligrams of D-ball specifically is my jam. But yeah, any of that stuff, it's different too. It's different than the oral version because you don't get those same stomach issues. I didn't get the same bloat from it, and I didn't get the same digestive bloat, But the anadrol, I never tried the injectable anadrol version, so I can't comment on that one.
I do got a question for you, Scott, on the injectable D-ball. Do you have to inject every day?
Yeah. And back when I used to use it during like actual, real bodybuilding, I would layer that in on training days. And then on non-training, actually, there was a point that I would time it up. So I would take oral in the morning and then injectable pre-workout in the afternoon. And then on non-training days, I just took oral and then oral. So, yeah. I tried it sub-Q because I wanted to, there's just so many shots. Plus you're, on a gram test plus and, close to that much EQ and then a little bit of NPP in there. And then the injectable D-ball on top of that. I tried to do it sub-Q, but it was just left too many, warm lumps.
Damn.
Yeah. Off-season stuff? What do you guys think of orals for off-season? Where would you place them?
I definitely agree more with Nate in the sense that like they should be used a little more sparingly because you're already eating so much, and like the last thing you want to do in the off season is like bring digestion and eating to a halt, right? Because like once you do that, it's hard to get it going again. Like the best thing to be is 20 weeks into your off season and still like fairly hungry. So you almost want to try to avoid doing anything that would. But I think you brought this up, Scott, like doing more of like a body part specific split in terms of, okay, my chest and shoulders are super weak. It's my push day. Maybe, adding in just 1 day of 100 milligrams a week in that sense. I think that's probably the best way to do it in the off season. Unless like you're just kickstarting an off season and your food is very low to start off with. And, you want to run like a 10, 15 day run of it before pulling it out. That's my take.
Yeah. How about you guys?
I'm just not big on orals in the off season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say it all, because I don't want to be that black and white, but it's incredibly uncommon. Now I'm speaking for myself. When it comes to clients, there can, and I am open to, because you just have some clients who just do want to run them. And, depending on your philosophy with, as a trainer, this is just me. I'm not saying right or wrong. I tend to concede to the client because ultimately I want the client happy in the end. As an example, if, I'm not on board with something that they want to do and I don't feel like it's egregious and it's putting their, health in jeopardy and I'm putting myself on the line, I'm going to have a back and forth with them, a discussion. I'm going to give my opinions, but ultimately in the end, I always tell them, if you want to run this, if you want to do this, or if you want to run these compounds, I'll support that. If it goes to orals in the off season, I am pretty black and white with a 4 week on, 4 week off. And I've talked about this before because I've seen the blood work over a lot of time in a lot of people. And to me, it's the best combination of getting the benefit from the oral, but not nailing your, liver values or your HDL. And so much so that if I, push to, I'd seen 6 weeks, 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off, or 6 weeks on, 4 weeks off, things like that. And even at that 6 week mark, those numbers would start to hit. But at the 4 week mark, there just has never been, there's the odd exception. There's always an outlier or two, but the vast majority of people don't get hit very hard with a 4 week run and then 4 weeks off. So that's just kind of what I had settled into after seeing that so frequently and for so long.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Scott, it's funny because actually I'm not a big oral guy, like I said, in the off season, but there was a couple of people I actually used D-ball with this off season because I think it doesn't quite hit the appetite quite as hard. And like you were saying, I do feel like there's not as much lethargy. So I do find it's a little bit more of a easier to balance per se, like maybe not as much bang for your buck, but you can sort of get away with it a little bit longer with some people. So I did use it a couple people this off season, and usually those are the people that can like eat without any issues. You know what I mean? So my big eaters that are like, they're unfazed, I guess. You know what I mean? You get a couple of those guys in your rosters that are like, okay, I know this guy can sort of handle it. Yeah. So try it out.
I think D-ball is like way out of popularity now. I think it's probably like one of the least popular compounds. Yeah.
100%.
I would say back in like the early 2000s, Skip.
Oh yeah.
It would have been like the thing. Am I right? Like that.
Oh yeah. If you go back even further, back into the 90s and the late 80s, I mean, everybody was using those little blue bottles of D-ball. It's almost like if you weren't using D-ball, you just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I feel like it was more. It was more of an accessibility issue. I could ask. I mean, I was, I could get a bunch of pink tie D-balls, but then like, I don't even think in 2003 or whatever, 2002, when I got in trouble, I even knew what Anadrol was, or I mean, I knew what Winstrol was, but I just couldn't get my hands on it from anywhere. I knew what Anavar was, but I'd never seen it on any price list of anything, in terms of being able to procure it for myself. It was really like D-ball, more D-ball, and a lot more D-ball.
What about DECA?
What's that?
What about DECA? Was DECA
injectables? Injectables were a little different. I mean, like,
do you remember the two? What were they? 2 mil?
Yep.
Vials where you'd have to get like a case of them. I can't remember what Organon?
Organon.
Yeah.
It was Organon, wasn't it? I'll be damned.
Do you guys remember the? I think they called them sachets. They were so
like
to get past like imports, they were putting them in these sheets that were like trying to think of a way to put it.
They're like ketchup packages, basically,
like ketchup
more
packets.
or less. Yeah.
Yes. No. Exactly. They were just like ketchup packets, and they would overfill them 1.5 mLs to make sure that you were getting the right amount, or you spilled some when you were drawing it out. Kind of unsanitary to, you know, but like, you know, thinking back
in our closet and it looked like pond scum. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine.
Well, like considering that, you know, you couldn't get trenbolone anywhere, so we all had to make it, right?
Yeah.
It was we were all doing chemistry and we were doing the conversion kits. Remember I think it was like Bass Killer kits and the what are some? There's a couple of guys that I remember. I still have their websites saved.
He was the big one, though.
But Bass Killer was like the big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys saw he passed?
Yeah. I saw a couple people mention that.
Pretty
like 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, not that long. Couple weeks, 2-3 weeks. Yeah.
R.I.P.
All right. Anyway, I guess that probably covers things. Anything else we should cover with this topic? We definitely hit contest prep. I think we covered some good thoughts on off season and how we've done it in the past, how we do it now. I think everybody used to front load. You know what I mean? That was the thing back in the early 2000s. You started with the test and D-ball, and then you know, whatever, cut it off after 6 weeks, and then ran it another 6 weeks, and you did your PCT like a good bodybuilder did.
Two things. Someone here asked about T-ball.
T-ball.
I'm gonna go on and say that T-ball was probably the most overrated oral that ever hit the market, in my opinion. What do you guys say?
I would say I have never used it once. Here's why. Back in the day, when everybody was talking about it, they said, "Oh, it's a drier version of D-ball. You won't gain as much muscle from it, but it works good." And when I heard you don't gain as much muscle from it, I just stopped listening.
Yeah,
I didn't care anymore. What happened to Skip?
I don't know. It's probably storming on his side too, so he maybe lost power or something.
I think he was. I heard he was playing with something.
He's always fiddling with that thing.
I just wanted to add for the listeners that the take-home message for orals in the off season is like your appetite should be the number one thing. So just make sure that's not disrupted. If you're going to disrupt your appetite, then it's sort of like pointless. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Well, that brings up the other topic I wanted to see if you guys had any thoughts on. Is there anything you should be doing different supplement-wise when running oral compounds?
Well, I know guys have used ox bile in the past to help with like stomach acidity. You know what I mean? Because I think I can't remember the science. You'll obviously know it, but as far as like what happens in the stomach from orals,
it's more the ox bile is more for the gallbladder, but yeah, that's definitely a supplement that guys could be adding in. Also, I mean, other liver supplements in general. You know,
yeah.
I'm a big fan of Live 52 DS, and you know, it's one of the only supplements that actually has clinical research behind it and studies for lowering like your AST, ALT, and your whatchamacallit, bilirubin. But other thing, do you guys do anything in terms of like any special drinks or anything in terms of supplementation changes?
Drinks?
Like I'm just saying, like do you do anything different supplement wise in terms of like health supplements to address the oncoming potential digestive issues when putting an oral?
Okay, digestive. Okay, I missed that. I had a little audio problem. I thought we all did, and I very clearly figured out it was only me.
I think one thing I'll say is that it's not a bad idea. That's one place where I would definitely consider getting labs. Before we are going to enter into any type of orals, I'm definitely going to consider doing labs before that. And that's one place when we've talked about, Andrew, you said like you'd like to see where you're at in the thick of it. I don't really care to see like right as I'm coming into the show, you know, but before I say added in some halo, I definitely want to know, like, okay, is this it's funny, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I was lucky enough that my doctor at the time when I was competing was a former competitor herself. So she'd talk to me off the record and she'd ask me what my game plan was. And she'd say, oh, yeah, okay, we'll come in, 3 weeks out then before you plan to start that halo and let's do some more lab work and see where you're at. I just think that's a smart move. And then here's one thought, and I'm not going to discredit supplements, but going in with a plan, remembering that dose and duration are going to be the two real big factors with orals. making sure that you're as healthy as possible going into it. My only fear with supplements is sometimes I think, and it's not that I don't use them or suggest them. I think sometimes, like back in the day, we used to think like, well, if you're taking milk thistle, your liver's going to be totally fine. You know what I mean? And I think we have a lot better health supplementation today, like glutathione, even NAC. We didn't talk about NAC in 2005. At least not many people were. But it's not like a insurance policy that's going to make sure that nothing happens wrong. You know what I mean?
Yep, that's a good point.
Let me ask you something, though. If you're getting your labs done at 3 weeks out before you're going to add like the final stages of compounds, are you going to change anything when you get those results back? If you're because like, I might, unless it says HDL is like 2.
Yeah,
I ain't changing anything.
Well, if my liver was like already real taxed, and my doctor, and she never did, if she were to say like, hey, you're already under a lot of stress right now, because I did see increased stress just from like the fast acting injectables, that was more stressful on my liver itself. But there was never a point that I didn't. There's that. But yeah, I honestly would have, if she told me like, hey, this is a big risk, then I wouldn't do it, you know?
And I hate to, I'm going to be the guy that'll say it, and I always get backlash from this, but so I'm just going to preface this with, I just don't give a shit what anybody says. And when I say that, I'm not talking about as much you guys, I'm talking about anybody listening. We all have those lines, we have those things. I won't take Superdrol, I will not take Halo. And I take a lot of shit. I have no aversion to performance enhancing compounds. None. Those two I don't want to take. But I'm not doing my blood work. Not during an oral or before an oral run, especially if it's a few weeks before a show. You know what? I don't want to know. I'm not saying I want to die. I've said this a million times. My health is important to me. But it's going to take a hit. I'm not going to be in a good spot. And I don't want to know if my HDL, because I anticipate that it's going to be pretty freaking low. And it's going to be low until after the show, and then it's going to recover. So I would do that blood work prior to the prep. I might do it slightly into the prep, but I'm not going to do it as it gets into those last 6 or 8 weeks. And then I'm going to do it. I might do it the day after the show, a couple days after the show.
Yeah. Well, do you
because
get what
then
I'm saying,
I have
though?
the opportunity to fix it, or not fix it, but I know the worst case scenario, and I know what I need to come out of. And the truth is, sometimes, I went to the hospital that time for a torn glute at 5 weeks out, and told them matter-of-factly, I don't want your lecture. This is what I'm on, because I thought I had a blood clot. Otherwise, I would never have told. I think it's the only time I've ever told a medical professional what I was on. And told them I do not want to know because they were going to do an extensive blood panel. Yeah. And I said, I don't want to know what those numbers are. And he told me at the end, he goes, I know you didn't want to know, but he goes, I was shocked that your blood markers weren't horrible. And I'm like, oh, no kidding. Okay. And then he told me that he knew me from the gym and stuff like that. So he probably we had this odd connect. I didn't recognize him, but the point is I did not want to know. And he only told me because he knew that I thought that it was going to be egregious.
Yeah. You're like, I can take more now. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I went back.
and I talk about this all the time, guys. There's so many different layers to genetics, and one of the genetic layers is your ability to process the drugs and not have negative side effects. You know, some people just have that extra level of detoxification, I guess, if you want to call it. I've got a guy, he's 300 pounds, and he's muscular. He's getting ready for a show in 26 weeks, and he is on more drugs than I've taken in my life at one time right now. And he got his labs done recently, and I was shocked to see that there wasn't red all over the place. You know what I mean? So it just goes to show you that, you know, and this isn't like a advice to, up your dose or to throw caution to the wind. It's just saying that there is a genetic component to all this stuff.
Yeah. Heck, there's things we can't talk about publicly, but we all know. We've talked to people who have seen the lab work of good pros, and we know some of the pros some of the guys who are even talking about like being really health conscious and stuff, that their lab work takes some, serious hits when they're in that place. People that have a lot of muscle, I'm saying, even people that look really good, it can still be a lot of stress on them. That's a good point.
And there may be a Mr. Olympia in there who won several Olympias and didn't take much, and I've seen that blood work, and then you just go, wow, you have been at that level.
Yeah.
And you walk away from the sport not going, well, I just shaved. Did I shave 10 years off of my life? Did I shave 15 years off of my? Gets to walk away probably in better health than 90% of us when we put down the syringe and put down the weights. It's like, wow, like holy shit.
I didn't mean to derail us though about health supplements, Andrew.
Yeah.
I kind of did. I didn't mean to, but I was just saying, I said my thing.
Well, I was going to add the glutathione. I was going to add, supplements of that nature. But honestly, I like to use that kind of stuff year round. So and I do advise clients to use stuff like that year round.
I think people are really turned on to things like glutathione now. I think that they're even like I said, NAC. These are like all that stuff. These are things that like people didn't talk about in the past. 15 years ago. I'd love to get into NAD Plus if I could, like the actual IV injectable NAD Plus. I'd love to get into that, but it's really, really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys see as, I kind of put the glutathione injections at, if not at the top of the list, pretty damn close to the top of the list as far as if you have a situation and you want to just see, it's almost like if that isn't going to do something, I don't know. I don't know what else to tell you. You need to get out of the sport or you need to just accept your fate, one or the other.
Where do you guys stand with Tutka?
Yeah, definitely up there.
Yeah.
I've actually, for when we're talking about running the orals, I've noticed that it helps a little bit with appetite, running the Tutka with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like 4 or 500?
That's where I was kind of getting at. Like, are there things we can use supplement-wise, not only to protect our health, but to keep that appetite, keep that digestion going better? Because I find that it's very rare, unless you're using mountains of tren in the off-season and eating a lot of food, that you're having digestive issues from testosterone or digestive issues from testosterone and EQ or even DECA usually. So I do think you had a question about that, Scott, about someone posted about DECA causing someone to throw up.
Oh, yeah.
Might be a good segue.
That sounds good to me. It was actually a guy who messaged me, and I wanted to get your opinions. At the end of the day, listen, I've had, at this point, a lot of experience seeing not only myself change with bodybuilding, but then others. As a coach, you get to see a lot of people. And then coming to this forum here with you guys, let's, quadruple that. Plus, we've got Skip, so even more, So I want to ask you guys if you've heard anything about this, because it was something that kind of puzzled me. He said he was using 5 tests, 5 DECA, and 200 MAST per week. And he is 5 weeks in, and he said, I'm getting some weird side effects. I said, what kind of side effects are you getting? I'm expecting ED, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. He says, no. He says, after I administer these compounds, for the next 2 days, I feel really sick. And I've even thrown up at the gym.
I think it could be the oil.
Bam! That's where I wanted you to go, Nate. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was hoping that's what you'd say. I could see that before the compound, right? Especially if it's so instantaneous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For that 48 hours or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. The other thing is too, possibly, has he not injected before and it's, I don't know, anxiety or something like that. But I'd go with the carrier before I would go. That's what I would go to first.
That's what I told him too. That's what I said is either carrier solvents. We don't know what kind of solvents he's using.
Yeah.
And I told him too. I was like, hey, if you think it, he said, I've never taken DECA. Is it that he's using that much more oil now? Even if it's the same brand he's always used, now he's using, instead of 1.5 milliliters or whatever, now he's using 3 or 2.5. So my suggestion or thought was I'd try just pulling the DECA first and see if it all clears up, and if it does, then maybe you're good, but maybe get another brand too.
Why would you say that using more oil in general?
If there was some sort of caustic solvent in this oil.
Oh, okay. So his body could tolerate
carrier,
1.5 cc's with that amount of solvent, but 3.
Yeah.
With that. I got you. Okay.
But I said, if it is the DECA for some reason, because I don't know, I've never heard of it before, but if it was the DECA, pull the DECA out, take one for your next shot and see if you still get it. And if you did, then, there's that. But I also kind of thought too that, I mentioned this to him, is that if you pull the DECA out and it goes away, don't try to take less. You know what I mean? Because I've had this. You guys ever have people that are like, well, if I eat too much lactose, I end up getting diarrhea. So I still like to keep, they still keep it in, but they're trying to use less of it. My thought is that if it's causing an issue and you get enough of it, it causes a real big issue. Like it could still be causing issues that we're not seeing. Just because you're not having diarrhea doesn't mean it's not still an irritant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. So,
I don't know. I guess that was an easy one. We had some other stuff here though. Let me see what we had here. Jason from Patreon. He said, thoughts on alternative cardio such as farmers walks or weighted vest as opposed to using a stationary bike or treadmill. Thanks.
I'm not doing that.
I like that. I'm actually thinking, why do people not use sex for cardio? Number one, you can use it as an excuse with your spouse or your partner. Be like, my trainer told me.
Yeah.
And I tell people that I'm close to, because I don't want to be creepy, that I have a good rapport with. But listen, I don't give a shit what you do for cardio. Just keep your heart rate elevated for a sustained period of time. I was having a hard time with that word. Sustained period of time, and that's your cardio. I don't care what you do. I mean, but if you have a 30-minute cardio session, you better be working. Because you got to work the entire time pretty consistently for 30 minutes. The point is that if you guys want to have if people want alternative, okay, cool. Farmers walks and shit like that. I don't know about you guys. Do you guys classify that more as like a?
Yes, I know what you're going to say.
Okay, yeah, I do too. I classify it as HIIT, and it's weight training. It's weight. You're burning more calories, okay, because you're sustaining it, but it's like circuit training and stuff like that. I try to separate the training and the stimulus for growth and recovery over here on the left. I try to keep them separate from the cardio. I don't want the two overlapping. I don't want one getting in the way of the other. I'm not a huge fan of, and I did this, of stepping at a high intensity either. I don't know how that doesn't get in the way of leg training. I've done real steps, 26 floors here. I did this last year. I'll be real quick, but this is a great point. 26 stories. Start at the bottom. And what I did, they're very, very short steps, which helps because I get more steps and it's not like these double stepping type thing. But it was shortly after my knee problem. I would plant my foot, whole foot, drive from my heel, and just slowly, and methodically, just do steps for 26 floors. Get on the elevator, and by the time I got to the top, I thought I was going to freaking die. I thought I was tachycardia, and my heart was going to blow up. Get on the elevator, go down, and then do it again, and I would do it 5 or 6 times. I built to that, obviously. But I would do that only one day of the week for cardio. I justified that because I'm like, this would be like kind of, it's HIIT, but I get a little glute work. I get to help my knee a little bit because how you after an injury, you favor one side. So it was giving me that focus of making sure that my mechanics and my gait was the same, the entire time, repetitiously. Great, right? Until I get, and you guys are going to laugh at this, but I get about 7 or 8 weeks in and I notice that my leg training poundages are really falling off. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm squatting 185 in the Smith machine. I get to 7 and I can't come out of the hole. My glutes felt like they were going to rip. Mm-hmm. So what I had done is it wasn't even overtraining my legs, or specifically it was fucking my glutes up. Huh. So then I had to pull back and I had to rest. I had pretty much just buried myself. Now, I understand that can be individual. I understand I can be different, and I don't have great recovery compared to the vast majority of people anyway. But how do you recover from that, especially when you're in a deficit, when your cardio is that intense, and how do you keep it from getting in the way? So that comes back to the farmer's walks and things like that. That's pretty strenuous, even hit with pushing a sled or something like that. I'm not saying it's bad. You're going to burn more calories, but I don't like the high intensity component of it, and I like to separate the two, the weight training and the cardio. I want to keep them separate. Man, I got worked up. I got excited. I had to sit back and everything.
Can't disagree with you.
Yeah. What do you think, Nate, overall? Do you ever do anything like that for your cardio?
Well, I think, steady state is tried and true for a reason, is because we're trying to preserve as much muscle as possible. We're trying to use as much glycogen as possible for our training. So stuff like that is going to interfere with, our training, like Skip just said, and obviously our nutrition, in my opinion. It's, for me, I want to get away with the type of cardio where I expend the least amount of energy, because I want to save that energy for training and recovery.
Yep.
So that's sort of my whole take on it. And also, a lot of guys, what happens is too, these are the type of people that they push themselves in the cardio, and as the weeks get closer, they want to do more, or they want to do higher intensity. And like Skip just said, that creates a recovery hole that you then can't get out of, or you need to rest and recover and lose time in a preparation. So, I mean, obviously for a lifestyle client, obviously, that can be a little bit, obviously, wiggle room, but I'm just going off for competing and sort of trying to get the best results as a coach. So I think that's going to interfere with getting your best results as far as getting on a bodybuilding stage.
Yeah.
Can I give Matt props posthumously? Matt Porter. He started to get into, I don't know that he was the first one, but he was one of the ones that was more vocal about NEAT and things, and just working at your desk, standing up, even though, and at the time I admit, I'm like, bro, you're standing up. It's just not that big of a deal. We're talking about a percent of a percent. But over time, I find it funny and a little ironic that's where we have started to go. And I know I have too, because I've replaced a lot of my cardio with what I consider to be NEAT. Yes, I'm doing all the NEAT in one specific time frame. But my point is this. I think that doing lower intensity more moving throughout the day is better than cramming that cardio in. And I understand it's a practicality issue too. I understand that too. I also understand that some people recover very, very well, and they can do, an hour, work up to an hour, 2 hours of cardio consistently, and it doesn't hit them all that hard. That's great. I think the vast majority of people, that's not the case. So I'm happy to see that the trend is not replacing cardio with NEAT, but that it's getting a lot more attention, because I've seen it myself, and I don't have a gifted metabolism. So if I've seen it and I have mediocre recovery and mediocre genetics, I would consider, or I would assume, that the vast majority of people would benefit from that too. And I've seen it with my clients. So I would rather my clients, if time allows and it's practical, for them to do longer walks, brisk walks, than I would to cram in a 30-minute cardio session at 130, as a 130 heart rate or something like that. And you guys know, the leaner you get and the more efficient your system becomes, that 130 when you start versus when you're getting leaner and your oxygen uptake is so much better, you're killing 130 to try to maintain that. So I had to pull back on that and bring that heart rate, that target heart rate down. And of course, it's different for, it can be different for different people. But the point is I like the trend. How long has it been? 4 or 5 years? I'm thinking it's about the last 4 or 5 years, where we're tending to go with a little bit longer duration, spending more time moving. Andrew, you say go for a walk after a meal. Things like that, I think, are very beneficial, and I think they're underrated.
Listen, I'm with you that it is fantastic. And 5 years ago, I was doing videos saying hey, look, I'm walking my dog. You don't have to do your cardio in the gym. You can take your dog for a walk, and it's super beneficial for your dog too. I'm beyond that now. Now I'm over it, because I think it's gone too far. I think that people are thinking that their NEAT cardio is going to completely replace any need for actual cardio. I can tell you out of my own personal experience, I did it for every one of my contest preps. I would start by walking outside, walking my dog. But there would come a point where I actually needed to get my heart rate up. I needed to get that real, I'll call it real cardio in. And I could tell you, I could see a world of difference between the two when I actually made that shift. I like the NEAT. I like NEAT cardio. Don't get me wrong. I think it has its place. I don't know how to measure it. I don't know how to measure it to say what's equivalent to what you're going to get from that 30-minute cardio session. You know what I mean? How do I equate that?
Well, you can still have a heart rate. Most people still have a heart rate tracker. So, as an example, I started off when I started my NEAT a few years ago, and I'm like, oh, I'll just do it for a specific time period. But then I noticed, okay, I do want to keep my heart rate right around, say, 100, 105, something like that. Because if it's not, then maybe I'm not doing it too high. There is a little bit of a black and white measure. But you just said yourself, even though, and I agree with you, everyone's going to be different. It is individual. But you were still able to not start regular cardio right away, and that kept you arguably recovering better while you didn't need it, and you put it in when you needed it. So I'm not saying that everybody can just do NEAT and they're going to get shredded.
I know you're not, but I'm afraid that's what people have translated
and I'm glad
it into.
I'm glad you clarified it, because that's not at all what I mean. But I am saying milk it and do those longer sessions and at less intensity until or if you need to switch those gears. I got absurdly lean in 2020 before my injury, and I was roughly 5 to 6 weeks out. I don't know that I would have had to end it. Now, I was doing walks of like an hour. Well, it was an hour in the morning and an hour at night. So, I mean, it is 2 hours. So from a time perspective, it was the same amount of time, but it was nowhere near the intensity. Again, we're talking like 100, 105 heart rate. I mean, you're on Clen, you might be
sitting
running
on the couch.
Resting heart rate, 75 or 70. So there's that.
Yeah. I was going to say something else about that. Scott Stevenson, I'll tell you, he would work on it. His last prep, he was like working on an RV in his garage. That was his NEAT cardio. He'd put in a few hours into that. I did have one other thought on that, but then it slipped my mind. So I'll let you guys say something.
Here's the other thought that maybe you were going with. I think this was on the.
All right.
It's
so
just
then we're on that wavelength.
It's waiting to be expressed.
Yes.
No, let's all think back to our lives 15 years ago.
Oh,
all of us. Well, maybe not Skip,
now.
but maybe Skip going back 25 years or 30 years ago.
Right.
Well, no. I only say this, Skip, because I know you've been coaching the longest, meaning you've been sitting at a desk the longest.
There's where we're going. Yes, that's where I was going with. You read my mind.
At some point in our lives, had much more active jobs. We didn't think of it as NEAT. We didn't think of it as movement. It was just our jobs. You were working the pop route, right, Scott?
I had so much NEAT from that. I could eat a ton of food and still couldn't get fat.
I was personal training 10 to 15 hours a day on my feet the whole time. Nate, you were running restaurants, Skip, I forget what you said you did before.
I was working with kids in residential and juvenile detention. So I had a lot of physical restraining and chasing kids. Stuff like that.
Even just there was no way you were sitting on your ass all day. You were on your feet because you're like, well, one of these kids might pop off at any minute and I had to be ready to go. So you were alert and you were physically like ready. Right. Whereas now we sit at a desk or we sit on the couch and like just click away all day. So we actually have to think about putting our NEAT together. We make these step goals for ourselves or whatever you want to call it, or these amount of times, that we're going for 5 walks for 5 minutes a day, that kind of stuff. So I think it's just more of a conscious effort to get the NEAT that we used to get that was built into our lives in a different point in time.
Yep. That ties into what I was thinking, Andrew, was that it depends on the individual. If a guy wants to work with me and he needs to lose fat, so he's going to do a contest, and he's say a postal worker, he's like out delivering mail, walking the neighborhoods. For him, adding more NEAT doesn't make sense. Then we're probably going to go to some sort of more intense cardio out the gate. But for like me, if I hired myself, I'd be like, dude, you're lazy. You literally sit at a desk all day long. It'd be a shame to see if you saw my steps.
Think about it. Do you ever look at your steps when like you've had a completely sedentary day that you didn't do cardio or you didn't do any programmed walk and it's like 2,100 steps and you're like
11?
Yeah,
you're right.
I went nowhere today. 11. I like that. That's pretty. And that's the point too of why I know I do. You guys probably do the same thing, but it's important when you onboard with a client that you find out what they're doing. What is your activity? What is your job? Are you in where 12 hours a day you're constantly on your feet and you're stressed? Or are you doing what Skip, Andrew, Nate, and Scott do, and we're just sitting, and the worst thing we have is, I think my wrists hurt. Like maybe my wrist. We're not going to pull anything. We're not going to have. We might have lower back issues.
Right.
Unless you and if you sit at a desk all day, I'll give you a little piece of advice. Get what is essentially an ottoman. to put your feet up on so that at least your hamstrings are stretched the vast majority of the time. Because if you think you're not going to battle with some at least lower back tightness, hamstring flexibility issues, you are dead wrong. Give it time. Eventually, it's gonna get up there.
So do you have an ottoman under there right now? Some sort of footrest?
I have a white trash ottoman. It's actually an upside down laundry basket, and my wife hates it. But the ottoman is too low. This is a taller basket. So I can turn it over and I put a pillow on top of it. Yeah. And 90% of the time I have my feet out in front of me, and so that they're up and my hamstrings are in more of a stretch position, because when they're under you for a long period of time, daily, for months and years, you're asking for trouble.
Reminder, buy ottoman later.
buy white trash ottoman.
Yeah, exactly. White trash ottoman, yeah.
All right. Let's see. Do we have time for one more? We've got a topic here. It's actually written down on a piece of paper. I thought we all thought this would be a fun one. And we'll make this like kind of our big closing topic. Can anyone be a pro? And further, can you tell if somebody is cut out to be pro just by looking at them?
No and yes.
Yeah, that covers it.
Get done. Thank you guys for tuning in.
I'd go even further. Just say this. Listen, I'm not trying to like sound like Mr. Know-It-All, but look, I've been doing what I've been doing for a long time, and I approach bodybuilding so methodically to the point of almost OCD for a very long time. If it was almost all about what I knew and time, I would have been a pro it'll be 40 years in April that I've been training. I think I would at least threaten, let's put it that way. It's just not that easy. I know people want to keep their dreams alive. I always did too. When I was 15, it was a formality. I was going to get to the Olympia stage. It was just a matter of how long it was going to take me. And I touched on that when we talked to Nick. Nick Walker, he said he knew it was going to happen. I'm like, Nick, I knew it was going to happen too, but it didn't happen. It didn't come close. Like, I just didn't get there. So that's a big no. And what was the other one?
Can you tell if somebody's going to be pro just by looking at them? Like,
that's a hard one. I'm going to wait on that for you guys, because that one's that's a rabbit hole. And I'll say that you can't tell. You can see structural and genetic gifts, but a lot of being a pro is under the surface too, not just psychologically, but digestion.
Yeah, I was going to say this.
Hormones, things like that. So I'll leave that because I don't want to talk for 10 minutes.
Is the question, do you know if they could be a pro, or do you know that they're going to be a pro?
If somebody it will be, like if somebody's cut out for it. Say, I think what we're getting at here is new guy comes to you. He's only been training for a short period of time. He watches the Blood, Sweat, and Gear podcast. He's like, I'm going to hire Andrew because I want to fast track this. Andrew, could I be pro? He's 19 years old. He's been lifting for 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, Skip started to touch on it. Like, you can obviously see the structure. You can see very early on with working together, like, how does their body respond, right? Like, you make a change. Oh, shoot, he's putting on 2 muscles this week, and he doesn't look like he's accruing any fat. And then, 20 weeks into an off season together, he's up 15, 16 quality pounds of muscle without having put on any fat. You're like, okay, this guy's got the structure, he's got the ability to put on muscle, we're staying healthy, so checks all those boxes. But I think, Scott, you started to allude to the mental aspect of it. How does he react when things get hard, like during the prep, or during when we hit our first snag in the fat loss phase, or when you ask him, hey man, like, we need to push these last 4 weeks, I need you to do 45 minutes cardio in the morning, 45 minutes at night. Is his response, well, oh man, I don't have time, or it's kind of making me tired, or it's making my legs kind of sore? Like, does he come up with a lot of excuses? Because those excuses are going to hold him back. Because as a good coach, you wouldn't ask someone to do stuff like that unless you knew it was going to make them look better, right? In terms of getting them to where they need to be on the day of the show. So I think, structure, how their body responds to the programming, how their body responds to drugs, obviously, is a big thing. But then like that last facet is the mental aspect. Like, do they have it? Because we've seen a lot of guys, I can think of 2 or 3 over the years where like, oh man, that guy's going to be nasty when he gets to a pro stage, but he barely makes it to nationals because he keeps pulling out of preps. There's a guy who 3 times he was doing national shows, and I remember me and Nate would talk like, oh, this guy's going to win the overall. Like it's already a foregone conclusion. If he comes in and he's in 90% shape compared to the other guys, his structure and his muscle bellies, he's going to win the show. But he did. The thing is, this guy 3 times never made it to the actual show.
That's such a shame. If we looked at Nate in Nate's darkest days, I'm sure nobody would be like, oh yeah, this guy's going to turn pro in bodybuilding one day. You know what I mean? It was not where you were at. I don't think you can really tell just by looking at somebody. What do you think, Nate? Dude, when you were younger, let's even say, let's go back to teenager years. Were you one of those guys that had that look? Like, did you have like the cap delts, like the 16-year-old kid in the locker room that's got the abs and the cap delts and doesn't even do anything?
I mean, I hate to say it, but I'll say I always had good delts and abs and like a small waist. So I definitely had like something going on for me. So, I mean, if I told people like from high school that, hey, I'm a pro bodybuilder, they might not be surprised. But I will say, though, at the same time, I've seen some people where they have, like, honestly, a good example is Seth Shaw. So I don't know if you remember how he looked when he started out, Andrew.
Yeah.
But he looked scrawny, tall, long. He did not look like he could put on muscle. And he ended up becoming a really nasty amateur and then turning pro. I mean, he stopped, but I guess some guys come up to you and they're like, they haven't even really been, like you said, been training that long or not at all. I've had guys that haven't really been in the gym that long and they're like, hey, do you think I can turn pro? And I'm like, well, my response is usually like, you got to give it at least a year or 2 to really start to see your genetic potential come to fruition. Whereas a lot of guys, it takes that, like, okay, like we got to see what sort of like, under the lights, like playing the game here for a couple of years to really see what you're working with and what your potential is. But I will add on what Andrew said is a lot of guys, it's that response, right? So, most of the guys that are going to be good or turn pro, you don't really have to change their program a lot or they respond very well, right? So and then you have guys where it's like a fighting battle, like back and forth, like check-in to check-in, like I got to play with stuff constantly. You got to do constant manipulations and it's like, man, I don't even know, you know what I mean? Like you start questioning. But I did want to say another thing as far as like I wanted to touch on this actually. It was a good topic, or part of the topic was I like using Brett Wilkin, even though he has obviously the genetics to make it, because I don't think everyone can turn pro. But he's the type of guy, he sort of forced it by eating. Dude, he eats like 6,000, 7,000 calories a day, not a meal. He's trained he's one of the hardest trainers I've seen.
Yeah.
And like him to do what he's done in that time frame is amazing. And I guess I use that for an example because I don't think everyone has that mental aspect that he has, you know what I mean? So without him having that, he wouldn't be as far as he's at today, you know what I mean, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There's the mental component is huge. I think there's a lot of really good, arguably professional bodybuilders in gyms all over the country, maybe the world, who just mentally, they don't have it. They don't want it. They are already a big fish in a small pond. It comes relatively easy to them. So I always say there's a lot of Derek Jeters out there that for whatever reason, they may not have been, maybe not a lot, but they didn't get seen. They weren't in the right place at the right time. I think that psychological component, though, is huge. Phil Heath is a good example. I saw him in 2002 when he competed. And he was a talk of Colorado. By 2003, it was very clear, crystal clear, that he was going to turn pro very quickly, but no one could obviously predict that he would go on to, have as many, wins and do as well as he did. But it was crystal clear that he was in a league that was he was on a different planet. The life issue, Andrew, what you were saying with being able to deal with the direction from trainers and questioning stuff, life is a big deal too. Not only how do you handle and respond to adversity when you're training and nutrition and things like that, but how do you handle life? I was watching Crime Show the other night, and I'm like, God, that looks like Victor Martinez. It was about his sister being murdered.
Oh, wow.
So, and I was just blown. I'm like, that is. They came back to him. They interviewed him.
Man,
and just
he
to
dealt with
see
a
that.
lot.
Oh, and I just thought to myself, he did not make much progress for quite a while at that time without at some point being able to compartmentalize and adapt to this horrendously horrible situation in his life. So it doesn't need to necessarily be bad. What about financial situation? What about relationship status? What about you've got a bunch of kids and your career is on the line? There's a lot of life stuff that can get in the way too. And that brings me to my last point. We've talked about this a lot behind the scenes. I'm going to say this, and I'm pretty sure you guys will back me up. The guys who do the best, been training people online exclusively for over 20 years. You guys have been doing this a long time too. I think you'll agree. The guys who go the furthest, and especially the ones who are gifted, but the guys who go the furthest, and I'm not dogging on anybody, I'm just saying, they don't ask 2,000 questions about the minutia. They do what you tell them to do, and they continue to get better. Doesn't mean they don't want to learn and they don't ask the occasional question, but those check-ins are about that long.
Yep.
They basically say, and I'm paraphrasing, okay, it'll get done, and there might be an question in there. It's not this deep dive into the minutia of the hows and whys. There's nothing wrong with that. Wanting to learn, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that my observation over so many clients over so many years, 2 decades, I've seen it. It's matter of fact, and it's just so crystal clear that the people who execute and the people who just do the plan, I think, Andrew, you call them soldiers. Those clients who are soldiers are the ones that they progress so much better than the ones who are digging into the details and the minutia that arguably sometimes doesn't matter.
100%.
Let me take it one step further, because there's a lot to be learned as a good soldier without asking the questions, without coming up with all that minutia that you're talking about, Skip. Like, if you're like, okay, so this is where I'm at, and this is the move coach made, there's a lot you can glean from that without even having that discussion, right? Without even having all these.
You watch it unfold.
You watch it unfold if you're a receptive person, and you also reinforce the fact, like, by not asking all these minutia questions, all these things that really are 1% difference makers out there. This is what the bread and butter, this is what the meat and potatoes is of the plan. This is what I got to focus on.
And if you're not going to respond to the bread and butter, are you going to respond to the minutia?
Well, I want to touch base on the soldiers part, because when we talk about it, it's almost like there's every level of genetics. So, like, I'll use my good buddy, our good buddy James Kelly, for example. He's a soldier, but he's a guy that's ended up turning pro because he was a soldier. You know what I mean? He can't get by on just his genetics. He has to check every box. And there's guys that will turn pro, but they have to do everything in order to the T years after years after years. So I think sometimes people get confused when we talk about, like, guys are just going to turn pro, like, because they have such amazing genetics. But there's layers of genetics. So you might be in the middle of the road and you can turn pro, but you got to be that soldier, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Man, you guys all said it very well. This is very well stated. We get questions like that all the time. Questions that relate to, like, how can I be a good client? You know, I think that answers it. That really does right there. All right. Let's wrap this thing up. Nate, are you taking...
Not before I get my word of the day. You said to remind you. I'm reminding you.
That's right. I did. I was like, Skip, if I forget, tell me. Word of the day. So we've got it for anybody who didn't know, though. Skip's got a word of the day. This is to educate us beyond just bodybuilding stuff. We're trying to get we're trying to become wordsmiths like Skip is.
Yeah, hardly. But anyway, I toned it down a little bit because I have to be careful that I want to provide words that can be used, not words, because if you can use it, then you'll remember it. If you're not going to use it and it doesn't pertain to anything, then it doesn't really matter a whole lot. So I'm going to go with apoplectic.
We're going to use that?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. And like I said, it's not that it's like, oh my goodness, I knew that word. Some people may know that word. That's fine. But it's a word that'll come up in conversation that can be used. Apoplectic is just, basically you're just beyond mad. You're like, if you really get somebody upset on Facebook and they're going back and forth with you and they're just getting nasty, then they're being apoplectic. So they're just so mad that not necessarily that they're out of control, but it's just their blood is boiling. They can't shut up. They're being apoplectic.
Can you use that in a sentence?
Don't be so apoplectic.
Quit being apoplectic. Calm down. I don't like dealing with apoplectic people on Facebook.
How about something like, what was that topic you got really excited about today, Skip? Was it the you said you're like, oh, I got to sit back because you got all excited on one of our topics. Skip got quite apoplectic about that topic.
I mean, I was emotional about it. But I wasn't.
You weren't angry. You weren't mad.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. My blood wasn't boiling or anything like that. So
would I say like you became apoplectic? Something like that?
I would have had to go to another level. I would have had to be. It would have had.
But that's
what
I mean, though. Like that's the way I'd phrase it. Not like, yeah.
I mean, it could be almost like disdain, and you're so worked up that you just can't let it go. You're seething. You're losing your shit. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I like that word. I could see using that in a way that would really irritate people. Like, hey, don't get all apoplectic on me. Just relax.
hey, whoa! Let's not get so apoplectic here, pal. Hold on a second. I'm Googling this. I don't know what this motherfucker just say. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I have to Google words all the time with like some of the new, like someone responded to me, bet, like BET.
Oh yeah, bet.
Oh, no kidding.
When I gave them directions and they're like, bet, and I'm like, bet what? Like, what are we betting? But I guess it's like a slang word, I guess, for like you bet or something like that,
or word, or yes.
Yes, yeah.
I agree. That's
you guys are so old right now.
Yeah,
I got kids, man. I got kids. Sometimes they'll say something to them. I'm like,
you know what word I had to look up, or the initials was NPC.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I know what the National Physique Committee is, but
I got you. Yeah,
NPC, and like there's NPCs. You guys know what that is? Yeah. Skip, do you know what an NPC is?
Well, no, not if it's a National Physique Committee. I'm like, what? How could you possibly not know that?
Non-playable character, like the guys in the video game that like they're the characters on the side of the road. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
It's like a diss.
Yeah. Like you're the main character, and everybody else is just NPCs.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, you're like saying like you're a beta, or you're like something of that.
Snowflake.
Something of that nature. Yeah. Guys, we appreciate you tuning in for another episode of Blood, Sweat, and Gear. Nate, are you taking new clients right now?
I am.
How do they reach out to you? What's the best way?
So at Instagram, just one word, Nate at Nate Spear, or you can email me at nathanspear25@live.com.
How is the YouTube going?
Dude, it's hard to be consistent, honestly, but it's at Nasty Nate Spear on YouTube. I do have like a good amount of videos, but I am trying to fire it up now that we're about coming up on 10 weeks out from Toronto this weekend.
Okay.
So trying to fire that back up. I'll probably have a video out in like a couple weeks, I would guess. So
nice. Hey, can we get you back on the show when you start closing in and talk about the prep with Andrew and stuff?
Of course, you know it.
All right. That's if Andrew's up for it.
I don't know.
All those secrets.
A lot of secrets here.
That's right.
Guys, you can also go to bodyberry.com to reach out to Andrew for coaching. And you can go to teamskip.com to reach out to Skip to learn all about Melanotan 2 and coaching. Get coaching from Skip. McNallyDiets@gmail.com for myself. Thank you, True Nutrition, for advertising with our programming. Guys, you can use code THINK to get additional savings over there. SupplementSource.ca for Canadians. They've got really good deals on label changes and short-dated products. And thank you to everybody from Patreon. I think I got a couple more Patreon questions we'll get to on the next show. And like I already said, the Blood, Sweat, and Gear stuff, guys. We'll see you soon. Thank you.